2 minutes. Okay. Welcome to the Scottsdale Planning Commission public hearing. The city encourages your interest and participation in the public hearing process. The Planning Commission is an advisory board of the City Council on land use and zoning matters. The meeting agenda items are development applications that require public hearings. The Planning Commission considers the request and makes a recommendation for approval or denial to the City Council. The City Council makes the final decision for or against approval of the application. The agenda consists of the roll call, minutes approval of the prior meeting. Continuances are for items that will not be heard tonight. Withdrawals are for items that have been withdrawn from any further consideration. Consent agenda is for items not likely to require a presentation or discussion. All items on the consent agenda may be voted on together, and any commissioner may move any item from the consent agenda to the regular agenda. Regular agenda is where each item includes a presentation and recommendation by staff, a presentation by the applicant, and public testimony. After, the applicant will have the opportunity to respond to the public testimony. The Planning Commission then discusses the case and votes. Non-action action is for items for discussion, and no vote will be made by the Planning Commission. Citizens wishing to speak on any agenda item may fill out a blue speaker card, or if not willing to speak, may fill out a yellow comment card and turn it in at the staff table before the agenda item is to be discussed. The chair will call you by name when it's your turn to speak. When called, come to the podium, state your name and address, and then begin speaking. Groups wishing to speak should elect a spokesperson to represent the views of the group. To facilitate the meeting, your comment will be limited to 3 minutes for individual speakers, 1 additional minute for each additional individual present at the meeting who has contributed their time to a representative speaker, up to 10 minutes. Please format your speech to be accommodated within the applicable time frame given. For convenience in timing presentations, a light system is installed on the podium. The light will be green for 2 minutes and yellow for 1 minute. Please conclude your comments when the red light appears. Thank you for your interest and time, and now I'll begin the meeting with a roll call.
Chair Higgs.
Present.
Vice Chair Young.
Here.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Present.
Commissioner Kaminsky. Here. Commissioner Ertel.
Here.
Commissioner Scarborough.
Here.
Commissioner Serena.
Here.
All present. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So moving on to general public comment for non-agenda items, those will be the yellow cards. Doesn't look like we've had any submitted. Okay, so now we'll move on to the administrative report presented by Ms. Katie Posler.
Thank you, Chair Higgs and Commissioners. We do have some administrative items. The first is that we'll be meeting on June 28th, so 2 weeks from now. We do have 3 cases on that agenda so far. The second is there is some additional correspondence in front of you for item number 2 and number 3. And that was also sent to you. And then we wanted to correct something on the agenda. For item number 3, it read that the case was previously withdrawn. So I just want to correct that. So for item number 3, the request is request by applicant for the Planning Commission to consider the acceptance of a new application submittal of a previously denied case in accordance with section 1.705 of the zoning ordinance. And then the last item is we are still experiencing technical difficulties, so this will be what we use the projector.
Okay, thank you, Ms.
Thank
Pussler.
you.
It may be a little too far out to look, but do you know, does it look like the July 12th meeting is still on the table?
I believe so.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you very much. Okay, now we will move on to the approval of minutes from the last meeting. Go ahead and ask for approval for the regular meeting minutes from May 24th.
Chair Higgs, I'll move to approve the May 24th, 2023 regular meeting minutes as written.
Great. We have a motion from Vice Chair Young
I'll second.
and a second from Commissioner Kaminsky. Roll call vote, please.
Chair Higgs,
Yes.
Vice Chair Young,
Yes.
Commissioner Gonzalez,
Yes.
Commissioner Kaminsky,
Yes.
Commissioner Ertel,
Yes.
Commissioner Scarborough,
Yes.
Commissioner Serena.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now we'll move on to action items, which would be the regular agenda. Agenda item number 2, 1TA 2022, Care Homes Text Amendment. The staff and applicant, Mr. Greg Bloomberg.
Thank you, Chair Higgs, Commissioners. Greg Bloomberg, Principal Planner, here to give you a presentation on 1TA 2022 with the Care Homes Text Amendment. You may recall this was on your agenda previously, and it was continued to allow staff to do a little bit of further evaluation. I'm coming back to you with essentially the same presentation with a couple of updated slides just for you to consider. So just a refresher on what this text amendment's all about. The gist of it is to amend the definition of care home, also to amend the criteria for obtaining a disability accommodation, add some criteria for requesting a minor disability accommodation. I want to point out that there are no changes to the care home criteria, i.e. separation, capacity, etc., proposed as part of this amendment. Oversight is still maintained. State license and annual fire inspection are required. And we have received some public comment, but no public comment has been received other than some inquiries since the last hearing. So I want to tell you kind of what this text amendment is not, just for a little clarification. This is not an overhaul of the care homes ordinance. We did a much more broader, comprehensive amendment back in 2017 that took about a year and a half to go through. And that was much more involved and much more broader in its scope. This one is much more succinct in its objectives. So again, I just wanted to reiterate that no changes to the care home criteria, i.e. separation, capacity, etc., are proposed. Excuse me just a moment. No increase in zoning districts is proposed either. The care homes would still only be permitted in single-family zoning districts. So just to give you another look at the proposed care homes definition, and I'll read it out loud for the record. Any licensed home pursuant to Title 36 of Arizona Revised Statutes, shared as a primary residence by more than 6, but not more than 10 persons, and in which on-site supervisory or other care services are provided for disabled residents. There's more to it, but that's the gist of the definition that's being updated. So there was a question at the last hearing about how we landed on a number 6 for a family. And I wanted to throw in a slide to kind of go over that a little bit. In Scottsdale, a family is defined as 6 or fewer persons living together as a single housekeeping unit. But why 6 residents? We did some benchmarking. We didn't just grab that number. As a matter of fact, there is a section of Arizona Revised Statutes that includes a definition for residential facility. Now, we're not talking about residential facilities here. We're talking about residential care homes. There is a difference in state law. But as you can see, a residential facility which serves 6 or fewer persons shall be considered a residential use of property for the purposes of all local zoning ordinances. So that's kind of the benchmark that we use to come up with our definition of family, so that it's kind of consistent with what the state considers a family. So that's how we came up with this in addition to some additional benchmarking, is how we came up with the number 6 for our definition of family. The disability accommodation, I'll go through that real quick. What is a disability accommodation? A disability accommodation is something in the ordinance that allows a person with a disability to request relief from a development standard or care home criterion. There's two categories. There's a minor disability accommodation, which is 10% or less of a development standard or criterion. And then there's a standard disability accommodation, which is greater than 10% of a development standard or criterion. Process-wise, minor disability accommodations can be processed by the zoning administrator at the administrative level. However, a standard disability accommodation would have to go through the Board of Adjustment for approval. So timeline-wise, again, we went to the Neighborhood Advisory Commission with this on February 23rd of last year. We also did 2 open houses, one on June 9th and one on June 16th of 22. And we haven't done any recently, just again because we haven't received a lot of public comment on this text amendment, so we have not done any additional open houses. And then on April 26th, we were here before you for consideration, and the case was continued. So we're back here tonight for reconsideration. And if there is a recommendation of approval, the case will be, regardless, essentially the case would be on the July 10th, 2023 City Council agenda tentatively. And that concludes staff's presentation. I can answer any immediate questions, but I do believe you have a request to speak on this case.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Bloomberg. We do have 2 requests to speak, and I want to make sure that the commissioners have a chance to ask you questions first. Commissioner Gonzalez.
Yes, sir. On the slide just before this, you had something that came up that was, okay, so why is the minor and why is the standard disability have to go to a Board of Adjustment? Is it because it's out of, that it needs to go to, why does it have to go to Board of Adjustment, I guess probably is the best way.
The only reason I'm aware of, and I might be able to get some clarification from a legal, but because it's greater than 10%, I'm not sure where exactly how we landed on 10%, but maybe Mr. Padilla has some background on that.
The Chair, members of the commission, the requirement to go to the Board of Adjustments is to have an independent board make that evaluation at a public hearing and free from, because the board is a quasi-judicial board, that process would be basically freer from what they call comments against, that sort of disparage the sober home community, and you get a lot of feedback that is kind of not related to the criteria, and so this independent board or quasi-judicial board is better able to handle staying on analysis of the issues and the criteria. So it was felt that that Board of Adjustment would be better to handle that.
Does that mean then if it goes to the Board of Adjustment, that is final? That doesn't go to a city council then?
The decision of the Board of Adjustment does not go to City Council. If someone wants to appeal that decision under the code, that appeal goes to Superior Court.
Thank you, sir.
Any additional questions for Mr. Bloomberg? Okay. So thank you, Mr. Bloomberg. We do have two requests to speak. First one would be Ms. Heather Dukes. Ms. Dukes, if you could please state your name and address, and just a reminder, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening, Chair Higgs and members of the Commission. My name is Heather Dukes, and I'm an attorney having an address of 5527 North 25th Street in Phoenix. I'm here this evening once again on behalf of certain sober living home operators and disabled residents who oppose the Care Home Text Amendment. On April 26th, we asked for a continuance of this matter because the Care Home Text Amendment fails to address several discriminatory provisions, and we've put those in a letter to you. We've talked with them, with the law department, with staff about those particular provisions. And one of the most concerning aspects of this care home ordinance, the current zoning ordinance, is that care homes are not allowed in multifamily residential zoning districts. That in itself is discriminatory on its face. So if you have between 7 and 10 disabled residents living as a single housekeeping unit, there's no option for them to live in multifamily housing. So if there's a condominium unit perhaps that has, 3 or 4 bedrooms, they would not be allowed to live in that condominium dwelling. So I'm not going to go through each one of the discriminatory sections again, but I do want you to know that they're in letters that are attached to your June 14th staff report. We also raised concerns that the Care Home Text Amendment intensifies the discrimination against disabled residents by significantly expanding the definition of care home and creating new notification requirements, even when it's just a zoning administrator making an administrative determination. There's no hearing, so there really should not be any type of public notification requirements if it's just a zoning administrator making a decision on a minor disability accommodation request. At the April 26th hearing, it was also disclosed to you that the current zoning ordinance and the city's treatment of sober living homes is the subject of a current HUD complaint. That case is ongoing and has been assigned to the Office of Systemic Investigations in Washington, D.C. We greatly appreciate your vote to continue this matter at the last hearing. We really do. But since that time, staff have not revised the text amendment to address our concerns. They have not scheduled additional meetings with us or the public to improve outreach or input. They have not used this opportunity to draft a care home and sober living home ordinance that is lawful and addresses the HUD complaint allegations to date. Instead, I received an email on June 12th confirming that staff does not wish to continue this matter further, and staff feels the amendment is sufficient as to accomplish the desired objectives. Clearly, the desired objective is not to address the allegations of discrimination pending before HUD, and it's not to create an inclusive community for persons with disabilities. To be clear, my clients are not opposed to regulations and separation standards being applied that are lawful, reasonable, and based on factual information. There's a delicate balance between regulations which help protect the health, safety, and welfare of disabled residents versus the perceived health, safety, and welfare and concerns of surrounding neighbors. This text amendment has not achieved that balance. It's not even close. So we would ask that you recommend denial of this text amendment as drafted and ask staff to go back and have additional public meetings and to create a more comprehensive text amendment of the ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dukes. If I could ask a point of clarification, when you mentioned minor disability accommodations, are you saying you would prefer that even the minor ones go through Board of Adjustment versus a zoning administrator? I just want to be sure I was clear.
No, so the minor disability accommodation, the way it's in the ordinance now, if you request like a 10% reduction in the separation standard, so it's 1,200 feet. Let's say you want to reduce it to 1,150. The zoning administrator would make that determination. We're okay with that. What's new about this ordinance is now you have to notify all the property owners within 300 feet of the property. That stirs up opposition. I mean, it's very difficult to request something having to do with a care home or a sober living home and not have neighborhood opposition because there's so much misinformation out there about these uses. So
Okay.
it's the notification part for an administrative process that we're opposed to.
Thank you. Commissioner Ertel?
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned that there's been no more, public comments. You haven't scheduled a meeting, and that was the same thing that was mentioned by the city. Did you reach out to the city and try to schedule a meeting, and you were rejected, or what? How'd that happen?
So we've had the same discussion with the city for over a year now. These are the same talking points. We've had it with the law department when the Board of Adjustment case was pending. We've had it with our HUD allegations, and then the city's response comes back to HUD. I mean, we're talking about the same things and what needs to be changed in the ordinance, and it's not being changed. I mean, the staff report to you today is exactly the same as it was.
Right.
So to expend my client's money to redraft an entire ordinance, I could do that. But at this point, we're not getting any positive feedback to make additional changes.
Okay, so if I understand, you didn't try to schedule a meeting, and you did not draft changes to the ordinance?
I did not draft changes to the ordinance, no.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Dukes.
Thank you.
Question for staff.
Oh, sure.
Question for Mr. Padilla. She mentioned, I know we can't talk about current legal cases with the city, but are any of these, just at a high level, any of the items we're talking about changing the text on, are those the same issues or same verbiage that are being the focus of any sort of legal action from HUD?
The HUD complaint that was filed by, I believe it was Mixed Duke's client, does include pretty much all of the issues that she has raised here. She raised those same concerns in her complaint that HUD is currently investigating. And the investigation is pending. They're pretty slow. I don't know when that investigation will be over. I know that Eric Anderson, who was handling that response to the complaint, had in his response indicated to HUD that if they had any recommendations themselves, that we would take their input in making additional, if necessary, amendments to the disability accommodation section of the code. But we've never heard back from them because they're still in the process of investigating.
Right. So are the text amendment changes that we're looking at, has staff worked with you to try to help hopefully get in front of the HUD issue? I'm just trying to understand where we're at in that process and how what we're looking at today, interacts or works with that HUD complaint, and does this resolve it or does this compound it?
It doesn't compound it. The city's position is that these changes help with ensuring that we are in compliance with federal law and HUD regulations for disability accommodations. What Ms. Dukes is asking is that the city go further and address issues like either eliminating or reducing the separation requirements between these care homes or allowing them into a different district than they're allowed now. She raised those issues in the HUD complaint. We haven't received a finding that is discriminatory. So the city, when it went out to make these presentations to the citizens, did not have those recommended changes. So what Ms. Dukes is saying is make the city go back and add those changes to the amendment. And the city at this point is saying, all we want you to do is pass these and recommend these to the city council for adoption, and if we need to go back and make additional changes, we can always do that.
Okay, thank you.
Quick point of clarification, Mr. Padilla, when you said you haven't received anything that indicates discrimination, but you haven't received anything that indicates it's not discrimination. You just haven't received anything. Is that correct?
Correct. We have not received
Okay.
a statement from HUD.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we have another speaker. Oh, did you mean to do agenda item number? I was wondering. Okay, that will be for agenda item number 3. Is there any further comment from Mr. Bloomberg or follow-up?
Chair Higgs and Commissioners, we certainly understand Ms. Duke's position. But our objective with this amendment was to keep it as simple as possible. If we were to, like Mr. Padilla mentioned, if we were to try to include some of the stuff that she would like, some of the changes that she would like to do, that would be way beyond the scope of what we've got here, and it would require, basically, we'd have to start from scratch. So what we would like to do is at least get these, what we feel are relatively minor changes and good clerical changes approved. And then again, as Mr. Padilla mentioned, if we need to go back and look at it again, we could certainly do that. Thank you.
And when you say go back and look at it again, that is after receiving feedback from HUD? Or?
No, I'm just, again, Chair Higgs and Commissioners, if this were to be approved, like recommendation of approval from the Planning Commission, approved by City Council, then we would go forward with these changes. And then we could, if the council said we would like the staff to explore additional changes to the ordinance, we could certainly do that.
I see, okay.
Right, and to add on to that, if we got a decision by HUD or strong recommendation by HUD to make additional changes, we would also take that information into account as well.
Sure.
Got it.
Perfect.
That was my next question. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, if not, if I could ask for a motion?
Chair Higgs, I will move to make a recommendation to City Council for approval of case 1TA 2022 after determining that the proposed text amendment is consistent and conforms with the adopted general plan.
Thank you. We have a motion from Vice Chair Young, and a second.
I second it.
A second from Commissioner Gonzalez. Can we please get a roll call?
Can we have a discussion on that motion, please?
Sure. Is that, can we?
think so.
When there's a motion out there, can we, or do we need to take the vote first?
You can discuss it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's part of the
Sure,
process.
Sure.
Yeah, I've got to say that I'm just overall disappointed. I hear what the city says, and I sympathize. You know, we want to keep it as simple as possible, make as few changes, as possible. And, if we need to make more, we can always come back later. But on the other hand, I would say, why don't we do what's right the first time rather than keeping it simple? On the other hand, and I realize I'm bringing in my own background of, having worked in corporate for years, if there's a contract presented to you and you don't like it, you don't just complain, you offer alternative language. This is what we want to accomplish, and I don't see that that's been done. So I'm disappointed on both sides. I'm going to oppose this motion. Something needs to be done, and I certainly hope that, I expect it to pass, but I certainly will oppose it because I would hope that City Council would say, let's do the right thing. They did that, a year or two ago when they passed the anti-discrimination ordinance that protected certain select minorities. Yet here's another group that needs some protection, some accommodation. So I would think that this would be the time to make those changes. I realize they're further reaching than what was anticipated, but still, if it's right, do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have a motion from Vice Chair Young and a second from Commissioner Gonzalez. Roll call vote, please.
Chair Higgs,
No.
Vice Chair Young,
Yes.
Commissioner Gonzalez,
Yes.
Commissioner Kaminsky,
Yes.
Commissioner Ertel,
No.
Commissioner Scarborough,
Yes.
Commissioner Serena.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-2. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now we have our final regular agenda item, Mercado Village. A staff presentation from Mr. Barnes.
Good evening, Chair Higgs, Vice Chair Young, Planning Commissioners. I'm Jeff Barnes with the city's Planning Department. This item is a little bit different than what you're normally being asked up here. It's not an official application in, but more a request to allow an application in. So I'm going to give a quick bit of information just to hopefully catch you up, and then turn it over to the applicant to walk you through their request and the details of that. So just as a fast refresher, the subject site location that we're talking about is generally where that yellow circle is on the screen there, south of Shea, on the east side of 92nd Street. That site had a previous application for a zoning and general plan amendment come through. You heard it last November. The City Council heard it last December and ultimately denied that application. And that's part of why they are back here to talk to you today. So they are interested in pursuing a new application project for that site. We have section 1.705 in the zoning ordinance that addresses what to do when a denied application or a withdrawn application comes back before a year's time has elapsed. And that puts the authority, the determination with you, the Planning Commission, on what to do in that instance. And so I've underlined sort of maybe the key to that code language, which talks about you having the authority to refuse to accept another development application for the same proposal. And there's not a whole lot of words there, but they are important ones in the context of what you're being asked. And there's not necessarily a definition provided in the zoning ordinance of what the same proposal is, and so that falls with you as well to determine in the context of the request. So your action options after hearing the applicant's presentation will include determining first and foremost, is this another development application for the same proposal in the context of that zoning section? If you determine that it is not the same proposal, then the inference there is that it's a different proposal, a new proposal, and they are able to proceed forward with making an application as anyone normally would with a new application. If you do determine that it is the same proposal, then your two options are to accept that request and allow them to submit a new application for the same proposal, or deny that request and make them wait the full 1 year time from when you last saw it last November. So that's the quick recap and overview of what the code says, and I'll turn it over to the applicant unless you've got any questions immediately for me.
Yep, Commissioner Kaminsky.
Yes, a couple quick questions. Does the new request require the same entitlements as their prior application, or are there differences just in the entitlements that they would be asking for?
Commissioner Kaminsky, if you're asking specifics of what their new request is going to have versus what the old one,
Like, was it a zoning and a rezoning, a general plan to general plan?
the applicant can probably tell you the very specific details. I would expect, and we haven't fully reviewed because it hasn't been submitted to us, that it would again be a zoning change and possibly a general plan change, depending on what the specifics are.
Okay, so I'll wait for them to answer that. And then I'm just curious from a timing standpoint, and you may not know this either, but if they came to us in November of last year, assuming that they were granted the opportunity to return prior to 1 year, we're in June, what would be the earliest they could logistically get back to us? I'm just curious.
That is a good question with a lot of variables to it. Effectively, if you allow them to move forward, they would be starting from the beginning. So we would be having a new preliminary discussion with them, directing them on process, having them submit the zoning and
Neighborhood
potentially
meeting.
general plan application. They'd be doing their neighborhood outreach. All of those steps would be occurring again.
Okay.
And so depending on the timing components of each of those, and if we as staff have comments back to them, various iterations through the review process, it'd be hard to project just when that might come back
So
through.
we're at 5 months away from last year's hearing anyway. I was just curious. 5 months seemed reasonable if they could shorten that time frame?
Potentially,
Okay.
potentially.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So now we'll have the applicant speak, Mr. Kurt Jones.
Chair, members of the Planning Commission, Kurt Jones with Tiffany and Bosco. We're at 2525 East Camelback Road in Phoenix, 85016. Here today with the folks from Caliber, Mr. Brian Snyder and Mr. Chris Duvage. We're requesting that you, let's go to the almost the same slide that Mr. Barnes had up, but basically I highlighted in yellow what the decision is here today. Basically, we have a denied application by the City Council, and the Planning Commission has the authority to refuse to accept another development application. And to Commissioner Kaminsky's questions, if we determine, or if the Planning Commission determines it's not the same, we have the ability to make that application as soon as possible. So we don't have to wait for applying. It's the application word in here that we would not be able to wait till, or we wouldn't have to wait till November to do it. We could start tomorrow with the open house advertisement and just start preparing an application based on what we have today. So my role today here isn't really to talk about the merits of the project, just to show that it's not the same proposal. So this is a chart I did and shared with a few of you already, but basically showing on the left-hand side what the previous proposal was and what our proposal is. The top one is on uses. We had two uses the last time. It was a large apartment building, and then we were rezoning the bottom or south portion of the Sprouts Shopping Center to include that as the mixture of uses in the plan unit development case. We have 4 uses proposed this time around. We have for sale residential in a redeveloped building on the site. We have apartments. We have live-work units on the bottom floor, filling in that sort of drive-through and park under portion of that building. And then we have medical office as part of a new building. The next one is the same, so I don't know why I have this on there, but we are proposing to use that main intersection, create a traffic signal that's not there, so that we have safe ingress and egress to the site and allows residents and folks on both sides of the street to cross 92nd Street safely. We're not including that south portion of the Sprouts Shopping Center, and therefore that was what changes our entitlements, Commissioner Kaminsky. We are not amending that portion of the general plan. That right now is a red commercial color. It was being changed in the previous proposal to the purple mixed-use color. That will not be as part of this request, since we're not rezoning that southern portion of the commercial center. So that'll be a change. There's an acreage change from about 8.5 acres gross to 6.6 acres. We are not proposing to share access with the parcel to our east, and I'll show you that on the site plan in a minute. We had one large building in the previous case. We have 3 different ones in this case. Again, we're only amending, there's an the existing front half of this parcel is already zoned plan unit development, so we're just amending the development plan, and I'll show you how it's really consistent with the 2013 zoning case. And we're just increasing the density, and then we're rezoning the back half and amending that general plan portion. Previous case had entirely a large, the parking for the residential was all in an above-ground parking garage. We are proposing all of the parking in the apartment section of this proposed plan to be underground. And then heights are relatively the same. However, the heights proposed with this proposal is actually a little bit lower on the front half, and I'll go through that. So these were the two the site plan on the left is what you saw back in November of last year. The site plan on the right is the new site plan. Brian and his team went out and did some meetings with stakeholders post the denial and determined that some of the folks didn't want a major change to this site. And that was some of the feedback. So what the idea here is on the right-hand side of the screen, if I can use the mouse here. On the right-hand side of the screen, this building here is the current building that you can drive under and park under right now. It's 2 floors above. It's a 3-story building because you can drive under it. That building is proposed to be rehabbed and redeveloped and reused, and then they're going to fill in the bottom floor so you can't drive under or park under anymore. And that was some of the ideas, is that this drive-by from 92nd Street, this sort of view of the site as it is today doesn't really change that much. because, and I'll show you some pictures later on in the presentation, that you really can't see this taller 44-foot building in the back. Proposing a new three-story building in the front where the existing 1.5-ish story office building is currently. On the bottom floor would be medical offices, and the top two floors would be residential units for sale. We are not proposing on this previous one. This is the access point to the parcel to the east. They had a residential application in. We are not proposing to share that driveway anymore. We are proposing pedestrian connections as part of our plan on both the south and north side. For fire access, this will be a fire access way around the property, and most likely to be grass created, so allow folks living there to walk their dogs and walk around the building and so forth, and use it as open space, since fire would probably use it just once in a blue moon. So those are the major changes to the site plan. This is the parking plan. As I mentioned before, we had a fully 3 or 4-story parking garage in the center of the building that was wrapped by the apartments, so that was all above grade. This parking plan, we maintain the at-grade parking in front of the building as you see it today. And then this building in the back will be entirely underground parked. This is just a difference in floor plans, but this shows you the live-work proposals on the first floor that we'll fill in and allow folks to rent or own these units for live-work options for businesses that they can have on the bottom floor of this building. This was that previous 2013 zoning case. It's a really bad reproduction here, but that was what was in the staff report. Basically, it shows you the existing building that you can drive under, and then this office building remained in the 2013 case. There's about 56 units for the density allowed in that zoning case. We're proposing approximately, we got about 56 condominiums we're proposing, but we're adding the 23 live works in the bottom floor. So that wouldn't be consistent with the development plan. We'd have to amend that development plan anyway. But just wanted to show you the consistency, back to sort of what those stakeholders were saying, the consistency of what was approved and what's out there and what we're proposing on our front end of our site plan. And again, this building, per that chart in the first slide I showed you, is a bit lower than the bigger building that was denied by the City Council last year. From a sort of a design and impact from the drive-by, this top graphic shows you the previous case. You had 2 wings directly on 92nd Street. Now with this proposal, you have just 1 wing on 92nd Street, and then this depicts that existing building in the back as depicted in this graphic. These are just a sort of a quick depiction. If you were up on a crane for some reason looking down on the live-work units, that's showing you what those would look like as part of the redevelopment of this building. This is a more at-grade level of the drive-by on 92nd Street with that main entrance driveway here that we're proposing to be signalized. This basically shows you that as the drive-by, you really don't get to see, if you're walking in or driving by, that proposed new apartment building in the rear on the back parcel. Another view of it, if you're back up on that crane for some reason, you then get to see that larger apartment building that we're proposing. But back down to this level, we're showing you it in white to kind of just show you how you lose the line of sight of that building from the drive-by. So with that, we're asking the Planning Commission to accept this proposal as not being the same, it being a very different proposal, and allow us to go back through the process without waiting the 1-year process. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Any questions? Yep, Commissioner Scarborough.
Thank you, Chair Higgs. I guess my first question is, closing out I apologize, let me start again. You're looking to rehab the first floor and add additional units there. In terms of parking, can you walk me through how the existing parking will service the building now with 23 additional units on the first floor?
Sure. Yes. Chair Higgs and Vice Chair or Commissioner Scarborough, the proposal on the live-work units, so right now in the previous plan you would come in off this main entrance, and we were pretty much removing most of the parking spaces that are at grade in front of the building on the west side of that building. With this proposal, we're maintaining this parking field here. So those would be the parking spaces for anyone who would be operating an insurance business or any type of live-work unit on that bottom floor. So they'd be parking at the at-grade level.
And it's sufficiently parked to meet code based on the existing parking in place?
Yes.
Okay. Question for Mr. Padilla, I apologize, I should have asked it beforehand, but as I was reading the terminology in terms of when this applicant can come back before us, it says upon denial. Since we're a recommending body, I assume the hearing that is of concern is the city council's hearing date. Is that correct or incorrect? That starts the 1 year moratorium.
Chair, members of the commission, I'm not quite sure I understood your question.
I want to say in Mr. Barnes' slide, it said if denied, then they have to wait 1 year. We don't deny on this commission. City council denies or approves. So I just want to make sure, I was referencing a slide by Mr. Barnes. I just want to make sure I understand, when does the 1 year start based on ordinance?
The 1 year would have started, it says within a year of the original hearing.
Correct, but the original hearing for action that is either approval or denial would be from city council. We are just a recommending body.
Correct.
So I'm asking, when does the 1 year moratorium kick in?
Mr. Barnes has that information.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Scarborough, if I could clarify at least how we've applied that. That code section talks about a withdrawal after planning commission or a denial by the city council.
Okay.
And placing the authority for determination with the planning commission, we have looked at the planning commission being the original hearing action rather than the council, because there would not always be a council action in the event where they withdrew after a planning commission hearing.
Understood, but this is a previously denied case, not a previously withdrawn case.
And the code section fails to clarify a distinction between those and applies the same language in both. But we've historically applied that to the planning commission hearing date for what that's worth in that context.
Okay, so you're using the planning commission hearing date, even though this was denied at city council, as the date of commencement for the 1 year moratorium. Okay, this is sort of an aside, but maybe that's worth reviewing as a text amendment at some point. It just seems very ambiguous, but that's just my thoughts. So thank you for that, and thank you for Mr. Jones for your answer. That's all I have for right now.
Any other questions for Mr. Jones before we have our request to speak? Commissioner Gonzalez.
Real quickly, sir, what is on this review right here, what is the height of these?
Chair Higgs, Commissioner Gonzalez, in the bottom part of this slide here shows you on the left-hand side what the heights were of the buildings that were denied by the City Council end of last year. The right-hand side, this is sort of this 32 and this 32. Jump a slide for you. 32 and 32 are this building here, these two buildings right here.
Okay.
Previously, this building here had a 2-story and a 3-story step, but they were 34 and 40 feet in height. And so then the back building is similar to the previous back parcel.
Okay, and then what is the density of the units per square foot on that? I mean, per acre on that?
So it's hard to read on this 4 font on this graphic here,
I know, that's why I'm
was,
asking.
let me make sure I got them correct here. It's the previous one, again, because it was a larger site, we included if you can see on the site plan, we included the southern half of the shopping center, so we gained acreage. That obviously lowers your density. That density was 32-ish dwelling units the acre. Since we're a smaller parcel with similar number of units, we went from 273 down to 266. The density increases because we have a smaller acreage to do the math, and that is about 40 units to the acre.
And it's what, sir?
40 acres.
Okay.
Commissioner Kaminsky.
Thank you. So I noticed you did keep the signalized intersection, but you've removed the potential for the vehicular access with connection to the east side. I'm wondering why, and if you would reconsider that as one of the features of the other design that I actually liked.
Chair Higgs and Commissioner Kaminsky, the answer to your question would be yes, we would consider it. But again, that's not what we're proposing in order to demonstrate we're not being the same application. So that's, well, it's a mixed answer there. But yes, obviously through the process of going back through a zoning case, the outreach, meeting with stakeholders, meeting in front of the Planning Commission, City Council, all that is going to be up for discussion.
Okay. I like anything that involves efficiency of the land use, so the underground garage is a great idea, and having a shared fire access and vehicular access obviously maximizes the utilization of the land, so I'd like you to consider that. I was also wondering, if this were approved, when would you anticipate doing a neighborhood meeting?
Chair Higgs and Commissioner Kaminsky, we don't have that even planned out at this point, so.
Not this summer, right? That would be the right answer.
Well, if we did do it in the summer, it'd be indoors. But I don't know if we have a schedule yet.
Okay.
So we're waiting for tonight's decision, and then we have to regroup. So.
Thank you.
But yeah, I get what you're saying, and I think that if we did want to move faster, which is the goal of this application, if we did hold a summer open house, we'd be holding more than just one, so that we do get folks that do come back.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, with that, Commissioner or Vice Chair Young.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Higgs. That was a really good point, and we've heard that before on other cases, particularly when you hold those open houses in the summertime, because some of the people that live in these neighborhoods are sometimes their second homes. So participation in those isn't always great. I think that, this is going to require some extra care based on its track record, and I think the maximum amount of input that you get is going to be paramount to your success if this moves forward. So, I think that was a really good point to make sure that, maybe those meetings are spread out over a certain amount of time. You may actually make it to the 1 year based on where we're at now, and then today's meeting would be a moot point. But I understand, your ambition to try to move this project forward. So, but yeah, I just wanted to reiterate that's going to be very important to make sure you got really good participation on that. So that's it.
Commissioner Ertel.
Thank you, Chair. Vice Chair makes a good point about summer residents. Perhaps you might consider, not just doing it inside, but also doing some zooming of that as well, so that, they would have opportunity to see and to input, I suppose. As I understand it, you have dropped, in the first proposal, the previous proposal, you had proposed to provide some physical accommodation for the retail that was to the north of you on the south end of the shopping center, and that's gone. You had proposed to basically put Cochise through to the east a bit, and that's gone. In the previous proposal, you didn't have any office space, if I'm correct. Yeah, okay, good. Make sure I don't go too far if I'm wrong here. So in this proposal, you're putting forth medical office space. And you're also adding the live-work units, which is, quasi-office space, if you will. So there are differences. I guess it comes down to how different is it. Commissioner Gonzalez points out that got to the point that there's more density, and you point out based on the acreage available. But if we drop the number of units, the density has dropped infinitesimally, but it's dropped. So anyway, so I was right on those points that about the eliminating the retail physical change and the addition of office space and the cutting off Cochise.
That's all correct.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Okay. So let's give our citizen in the audience a chance to speak, Mr. Joel Broder. If you could please state your name and address, and as a reminder, you have 3 minutes.
Chair Higgs, Commissioners, my name is Joel Broder, 10185 East Bella Vista Drive, Scottsdale, Arizona. I'm a resident of Scottsdale Ranch, and I'm actually the developer who rezoned this property in 2013 for mixed use. So I have tracked this property through numerous changes and proposals and presentations and neighborhood meetings, and I probably have tracked it as closely as anybody and participated in it as closely as anybody. I was at the public hearings, or the neighborhood meetings and the public hearings on the last iteration. I will tell you, this is 180 degrees different than what they proposed last time, for good reason, because there was a lot of conversation. They took that into consideration. They were coming back with a much better proposal and a 180-degree difference. When I rezoned this property back in 2013, the location where the apartment building is planned on being presented was going to be a fertility clinic. You know, it was zone CO office at the time. And if you go back and look at that plan for development, it's basically the same massing in the apartment building that they're proposing as was already approved for development, you know, back in the day. So not a lot has changed in terms of massing and what it looked like back then when it was approved. They've just sort of brought it forward and I think recognized what the neighborhood you know, had to say about it. The reason I'm up here today is I happened to go to next door and I saw some chatter about this project, and I think there was some confusion about whether this was a public hearing on the merits of the project or not. And I wanted to make sure that if neighbors did show up or this somehow got out into the neighborhood, that the record would be clear. This is not a hearing on the land use. This is simply a hearing of whether or not to allow them to resubmit sooner rather than later. So that's why I decided to attend today and put this in. If you'll let them go forward now, sooner rather than later, I think there's a better chance that the outreach and the neighborhood meetings will take place in the fall, which is what I think everybody probably wants them to occur, than if you push them out even further for reapplication, and then by the time they work through the process, they may be back into the summer in terms of neighborhood meetings again, and we don't want that to happen. So I hope you view this proposal as being favorable. I think the neighborhood will view it as being favorable. I think it's a great addition you know, to what we have out there, and I would be excited to see it come to fruition, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Broder. Yeah, Commissioner Gonzalez has a follow-up question.
So I was also around when that was rezoned. As I remember, all that was CO. Was that correct?
It was all CO, and I rezoned the portion that were office buildings, the 2 office buildings, to mixed use so that we could do residential. Yeah.
Right, but...
and office.
Okay, when you, was it the medical side also that you did, or was it the north parcel, which is the retail side?
No, we didn't touch the retail side. It was just the parcel with the large building and the small building. Those 2 buildings were the only thing that was rezoned.
Very good. Thank you, sir.
And there is, by the way, a fantastic pedestrian connection to the retail next door, which in the previous plan, you would really not have that same connection as you have now in this, you know, this preservation of that existing big 3-story
Very good. Thank you.
building there. Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Broder, I appreciate you taking the time to come down and speak this evening. I too have seen a lot of those comments on Nextdoor, and I think there is some misunderstanding as to the intent of this meeting this evening, so it's helpful to not just have staff or planning commission state what the intent of this meeting is, but also to have outside perspectives, so thank you.
And I've been one of the vocal critics of this project,
Okay.
so I wanted to make sure that, you know, it gets a fair shake in the public media. Or
Wonderful, thank you
social.
so much, appreciate it.
Okay,
Thank you. Okay. Any other comments or questions? Yeah, I'm sorry? Oh, discussion, sure. Commissioner Scarborough.
Thank you, Chair Higgs. I did get a chance to meet with the applicant here, and he did go through the exact same spreadsheet we all received in terms of how the project changed. From what I can see, I think I believe that there's substantial changes in use and zoning that I would be in favor of allowing the applicant to run the gauntlet again. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Serena?
Yeah, I think my only request is if we do this, or we approve that it is a new project, and this moves forward at some point and makes its way to council, if we can just attach in there, at least from, my voice being one of 7, if they agree, it sounds like everybody else does, around the text of how we're actually supposed to interpret what 1 year means and what more so the change means. This has happened a couple of times since I've been on planning, and it becomes a very subjective discussion over what change means and if the project is different or not different, or whatever the text actually reads. And I think it would help us and help the applicant. It would probably just help everybody involved if there was a little more language around that. And so if that request can be included in the packet moving forward to council, that at least if I have agreement from the other planning commissioners, that council separately maybe look at this text amendment in the future. But I agree that this project is different. I mean, number of buildings, everything. It's not to the merits of the case or not, but this is certainly a different project. And based on the text amendment and how we're supposed to interpret it, I would agree that this is a new project and at least should be allowed to move forward as a new project, and then discuss the merits of that at another planning meeting in the future.
Thank you, Commissioner Serena. Commissioner Kaminsky.
I was looking at the total number of units, and I recognize the density changes because of the area. There's only a 7-unit difference between the prior and the current, and one way of looking at threshold of change is looking at what's considered minor or major, and sometimes a 10% number is used if it's a minor change, or major. So that might be something to consider in a future text amendment in terms of helping us inform us on how we evaluate substantial change to be different. In looking at the form, obviously it's different. And I know there's a challenge to the applicant in trying to demonstrate that it's different enough by eliminating some things and adding other things. So looking at the timing of this, obviously I don't want to see a neighborhood meeting take place in the summer, but if the form is different enough, the investment in underground parking is significantly different. Omission of the retail site, which to me never made sense, including somebody else's parcel that's really not a part, looked more like a manipulation of density than an actual mixed-use project. You're doing mixed use on this site. That back parcel needs to be developed. It's similar in form to what was there before. So I'll be in support of this request to allow you to make that application, because the application is just pulling the trigger to starting that whole process over again, and that's going to take several months at least, so thank you.
Yes, thank you. Do we have a motion from anyone?
So, Chair,
Yes.
members of the Commissioner, there's some confusion down here with city staff on the comments that Commissioner Serena made about trying to tie this into a text amendment. So your motion, the motion here doesn't go anywhere else. In essence, if you've got 3 options on what you can move and what motion you can make and to go on. It sounded like Commissioner Serena wanted that tied into a text amendment.
No, I'm sorry. Let me clarify that. I was just saying that as comments from planning are normally added to a packet when presented to council down the road, I was just suggesting that if that were the case, as feedback, which I know you've done in other cases, include just generic feedback from planning commissioners to the case, is that be added to this packet in the future, so it's kind of on record that as a commission, and you could poll everybody individually, but it sounds like at least Commissioner Kaminsky on board, is that the language around that text amendment, that council possibly look at that. It's not added to the language, not added to the motion. It's just strictly general feedback to be added to this, and hopefully council might look at it. If they choose not to, then that's up to them.
Okay, so they'd get a copy of these minutes. That would be
correct.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe I know in the past sometimes certain parts of the minutes are emphasized or added, kind of pulled out of just the generic minutes, which become a lot for them to read on a sometimes a presentation or a deck that's presented. Maybe that would be a great.
Okay. Thank you very much for the clarification.
Yeah, no problem.
Great. Okay. Commissioner Ertel?
I move to determine that what is presented is not the same proposal, and the application should be accepted for future consideration.
Second.
Motion for Commissioner Ertel and a second from Commissioner Scarborough. Roll call vote, please.
Chair Higgs,
Yes.
Vice Chair Young,
Yes.
Commissioner Gonzalez,
No.
Commissioner Kaminsky,
Yes.
Commissioner Ertel,
Yes.
Commissioner Scarborough,
Yes.
Commissioner Serena.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-1. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other final comments or questions from commissioners or staff? Okay, with that, motion for adjournment, please.
So moved.
A motion and a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Motion passes. We're adjourned. Thank you so much. Have a good evening.